What is up, Internet? AJ here, and welcome back to the channel. This week we've got a pretty awesome video figured out for you guys because it's actually inspired by one of my viewers. One of you guys out in the Discord, I'll have the link to that down below, has requested that we go over the process of creating a character in D&D 5th edition, so that's exactly what we're going to do today. Now, we've got a ton of stuff to go over, but before we get started, if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button and go ahead and hit the bell icon for notifications of when we post new videos. We post every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 3 videos a week, so we got a ton of content coming for you guys, so make sure you stay alerted to when it's coming out. Also, if you guys got any questions, feel free to leave a comment, and if you like what we're doing, do hit that like button and even share with your friends if you think it'll help them out. Now, let's go ahead and get into this. We got a ton of stuff to cover. So for this character, we're actually going to be using D&D Beyond's character builder. It's a pretty straightforward setup. It's going to cover all of the things that you would have on your character sheet. And it also breaks it down into a pretty straightforward way of doing it. So you kind of keep on pace and don't have to worry about getting too confused with things. Plus, you can always go back to other tabs and see what you might have missed or change things if you don't like what you have there. Now, you could do this on a normal character sheet, but for our sake and for the video, it's just a little bit easier if we do it this way. Now, if you look, we've already picked the character name. That's AJRPG. We're just going with the general name here to get the ball rolling. And the first thing we're going to do here is we're actually going to pick a race. Now, I have all of the races listed here based off of what's available in the player's handbook. Just to kind of make it easy, it's probably what you're going to have most available to you right off the bat. Now, you'll want to take a little time and figure out what kind of character you want to build, but since I already got kind of an idea of what I'm working with here, I'm going to go ahead and start off with Dragonborn right away. Now, each of the races are going to have stats that increase your abilities or lower them in some rare cases, but those things will affect your character. So putting thought into the race that you want to play does actually make a difference here. So we're going to go ahead and choose the Dragonborn as a race. And the next thing we'll go into is some of the things that they have available to them. So with Dragonborn specifically, they can actually choose a draconic ancestry, and that will affect their abilities that they can do. And each of the races here may have something to choose from. So kind of look over it while you're creating your character, see if there's something that gives you options and find what fits best for your character. Now, the good thing about D&D Beyond is it'll actually have a list here that you can choose from and give you details about the different things. For my specific instance, I'm actually going to choose a gold dragon for the draconic ancestry for this specific character. When you're going over your character, just kind of look over all the things available. It'll have it broken down by level in the player's handbook so you know what's coming to you at specific levels. So the next thing we're going to cover here is going to be the class of your character. What is it that they do? Are they up in the front lines in melee? Are they hanging back, casting spells, or maybe with a bow and arrow? The class you decide on is going to dictate what your character does, more specifically in combat, but there are some things that apply to general actions as well. Now, at some point, you'll get to choose a sort of offshoot for your character's class, and that normally comes around level 3. Sometimes classes choose those right from the offset, but it's something to kind of keep in mind right off the bat when you're developing your character so that you know what path you want to go down later on. Now, if you are building your character in D&D Beyond, they're actually going to have a whole list of different things here available for your class when you go to confirm it. Now, most classes are going to have an ability score improvement at set intervals, so you don't have to worry about that. Side note, you can also choose a feat instead when you get that option. But there's also other things that are going to become available as the class levels up. And I know on D&D Beyond, you can kind of scroll down and see what those are going to be. All that's going to be listed in the player's handbook as well. So if you are doing this on pen and paper, you can just kind of glance through there and get a better idea as well. So at level 1, there's a couple things you're going to pick right off the bat. First off is going to be proficiencies. Each class is going to give you a list of proficiencies that you can choose from to determine what your character is good at right off the bat. Now, there may be other things in the future that allow you to gain more proficiencies, but you're going to have a couple to start out with right away just from your class. Now, if you're doing this on D&D Beyond, they'll also have a little bit of a rundown of your spell casting, give you a blurb on that. All that stuff you're going to find in your player's handbook under your class selection. And on D&D Beyond, it's pretty much word for word, so you don't have to worry about any discrepancies that way. Now, Sorcerer is a good example of what I was talking about before, in that you actually pick their offshoot early on. Sorcerers specifically have a sorceress origin. What that's going to do is dictate kind of what path they go along. Now here you can actually pick another draconic origin, and I'm going to pick a different one here just for giggles and grins, but that will give you different stats later on down the line, and all of the classes are going to have that offshoot that you'll get different bonuses from as you level up. They'll be at different intervals. You're not going to get them with every level, but you will have options down the line. So the next thing you're going to do is you're going to look on the left side of your character sheet if you got a pen and paper one, or if you are on the character builder, you can have a little bit different layout here, but we're going to look at the ability scores. These are your different stats that affect pretty much everything you do: strength, dex, all of that stuff. If you're looking at a character sheet, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Now, there's a few different ways you can generate these, and most people roll dice for them, in which case you roll 46 and drop the lowest score. Take that as your total. There's different variants for that. I have my own homebrew stuff that I kind of do for that, but there's a couple other different ways that are actually listed in the book that you can do to get your scores. So aside from doing them with the dice rolls, you can actually use a point buy system, which in this case, if you do point buy, it brings up a system to where you can choose what your stats are and reduces from a point total that you actually have. Basically, you're using this point pool that you have to increase your scores that you would be using for your ability scores. It's a pretty straightforward system as far as how it works, but the discrepancy is how many points each score costs, and that's what it breaks down to. Scores above an 8 are going to cost you points. So like it's listed here on the screen, if you take a look, anything above an 8 is going to start deducting points from your pool, which you have 27 points to decide from. It starts out at 1 point intervals as you increase your score from 8 going up. As you can see on the screen here, I've got it listed for you, until you get up to 14. Then it goes from 5 points up to 7, and if you go with a score of 15, it jumps up to 9 points. So it's going to deduct quite a bit there. And honestly, your scores don't vary as much. These other couple ways of determining your ability scores are going to keep it a little more balanced, but they're going to also kind of help you from having scores that are really on the low end. It's just a little less chaotic. And the other way of doing it is with what is called standard array. Now with standard array, there are a set list of ability scores that you can use ranging from 8 up to 15. Now, none of these scores are going to be insanely high, but this way you're going to have a pretty diversely capable character. They're going to be pretty well rounded, with none of the scores being insanely low, but none of the scores being insanely high. It also means you don't have to worry about winding up with a 6 or lower on one of your ability scores. Now for this character, we're just going to use standard array for the sake of brevity. I've already gone ahead and punched in the scores there, so we can actually move on to the next thing. But before we move on, I also want to point out you can see what your modifiers are at this point, depending on what your score is. And your modifiers are going to change based on what the ability score is, with 10 being considered average and a modifier of 0. For every 2 points you go up or down, it's either a +1 or a -1 to your modifier. Now, as far as ability scores, unless you have an item that says differently, the maximum you can get is a 20, and that's going to give you a +5 modifier. Now going the opposite direction, again, it goes down by 2, so an 8 would be a -1, a 6 would be a -2, and so on and so forth. Now, bear in mind, if your character has a 0 in any one of these ability scores, bad things happen. Basically what it comes down to, if any one of these stats has a 0 for the ability, your character is incapacitated, with the most extreme being Constitution. If your Constitution is a 0, your character's dead. Moving on, the next part is optional, and you don't have to use it. Some DMs even prefer you don't. This is going to be your background. Now, each of the backgrounds may give you some different proficiencies or different inherent abilities that come along with the background, and it's something that you can kind of look over, but it'll also help you flesh out your character's story a little bit more if you decide to go this route. Now, as you can see here, I chose the folk hero background. It's going to give me a couple proficiencies, in this case, animal handling and survival. It'll give me tool proficiencies, vehicles for some reason, don't quite get that one, and then you can choose artisan tools. Now, each one is going to be different as far as what it provides, but in this case, it also has some other bonuses that you get. And most of these aren't going to be game-breaking in any way, but they are going to kind of dictate certain interactions your characters can have with NPCs. So it's something that might be useful in terms of storyline stuff for the game. Now with these backgrounds, there's going to be a list of characteristics that your character can choose. Personality traits, these will help you flesh out the way your character acts. Ideals, pretty straightforward, what sort of ideals your character holds. Has a list of different ones that might apply to your character. Your bonds are going to be sort of what motivates your character to do certain things. And flaws are going to be just that. Flaws your characters have that may come as a detriment, but could also make them a little more interesting. Now, none of these by any means are absolutely required, but they do help flesh out your character a little bit more and just can make for a fun, more interesting character. Also keep in mind the stuff that's going to be listed either on D&D Beyond or even in your player's handbook are going to be a list of suggestions. You can totally come up with your own if you want. There's really nothing saying that you don't have to. Touch base with your DM, see what they think. Beyond that, if you're looking at your character sheet, it'll be up in the top right corner. If you're on D&D Beyond, it'll be on this page as well. Details about your character. So character details as far as alignment, faith, what sort of lifestyle they're living. And by that, are they living in squalor or do they live a more modest lifestyle? How are they living financially? As far as alignment, I've got an entire video about why that's still important. I'll post a card up above. Be sure to check that out, kind of see why it still matters. But they've got the entire list of alignments listed in the player's handbook, and it's going to give you a little bit better idea as far as a direction for some of your character's behaviors. Take a look at them. Some DMs are going to be particular about what alignments they allow in their game. And then as far as your religion, what deity do they follow? Are there any tenets they need to believe in? Some of this stuff isn't used a whole lot, but for certain classes it really is. I'm looking at you, Cleric and Paladin. Beyond that, you've got physical characteristics. What does your character look like? Give them a description. You've probably already pictured them in your head, so this part should be one of the easiest things you do. From there, we're going to go to equipment. Well, not necessarily equipment. In some cases, you may just start with gold, or you could start with the equipment for your starting class. That is going to depend mostly on what your DM decides they want to do. They may have something figured out already for you. But if you're starting with equipment, when you look at your class sheet in the player's handbook, it's actually going to have a list of starting options for your character. And there'll be a few things you have to decide on, but it's going to give you a good starting base for your character. If your DM decides to go the gold option, they may just give you a small purse of gold and tell you to, hey, go shopping, decide which character wants to carry with them that way. Both of these options have their merits, but it typically comes down to what the DM decides they want to do. So just check with them and they'll give you the go-ahead. And there you have it, folks. You've pretty much created your character just like that. If you are playing a spellcaster, you are going to have to go through and choose your spells. I've got an entire video dedicated to the finer points of spellcasting in D&D 5e. Go ahead and click the link up above to check that out. I definitely recommend it. It might clarify things a little bit for you. But aside from that, everything you need is going to be on the sheet. Now, if you need to fill stuff out on a manual piece of paper, you can see that all your skills are going to be listed there. And it is going to actually have the ability associated with the skill, so you know what to put there. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is if you have proficiencies, there's a little circle next to those skills that you can mark off to indicate your proficiency with that skill. Your proficiency bonus is actually going to level up as your character levels up. And you can see what it's going to be at each level by looking at your class sheet. So it's pretty easy to find there. But if you're proficient with a skill, you'll take the ability for that skill and your proficiency modifier and add them together. And that's what you're going to use on your dice rolls. Now, having the circles on your character sheet, having those filled in lets you know what you're proficient in. You just add your proficiency bonus to your ability score modifier, and that is what you're going to add to your skill rolls. Pretty straightforward, nice and easy. Now, one thing I didn't cover in this is going to be hit points. The reason I didn't touch on that is because at first level, your hit points are going to be at their max. What I mean by that is, at each level, you're going to roll your class's hit dice, and that can range anywhere from a d6 up to a d12, and you'll add that to your Constitution modifier. Now, at first level, you're going to take the max of that dice and add it to your Constitution modifier, and whatever bonuses you might also have. In the case of this character, their hit points are 7. 6 would be the maximum for their hit dice, and I have a 0 Constitution, but I do get a +1 from one of their skills chosen by their class. Beyond that, when you level up, you'll go ahead and roll your dice and add your Constitution modifier, and that's how you figure it out from there. Your DM may have a different way of doing it, though, or even just homebrew as far as what they allow and what they don't. The last thing I do want to touch on here, and you'll see it on this screen, you'll probably see it on your character sheet as well, your passive skills. Now, all of your skills can be used passively, and I'll probably do a video touching on this later, but what it comes down to is if you're doing it passively, you just add 10 plus that skill or abilities modifier. In this case, as you see, passive perception, which is passive wisdom, gets a +2 added to the 10. The simplest way of looking at it, and this is something that your DM will note more than you, but it is something to kind of keep an eye on, as there are things that you can use to bump those numbers up. And there you have it. There's your character. I hope I was able to clarify everything for you guys, but if you do have any questions, feel free to leave it down in the comment section down below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell icon for notifications. We post videos 3 times a week here, and feel free to join the Discord, join the conversation about D&D. So with that, I hope you guys have a great weekend, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Happy gaming!